Welcome to this podcast, Mission GJ. At this time, we have our Apostle Erickson Salazar. How good it is to flow here in the prophetic for the house. That's right, Lewis says, the place where we all come to feed ourselves with the word and to nourish ourselves with it. And at this time, maybe I don't need to introduce this podcast. Maybe everybody has already introduced it in their own minds, because this monologue that was recently shared was very impactful. The ministry Generation Joshua constantly tells us who we are through the Life Manual. The Life Manual expresses constantly, every day, who we are, who we really are. And at this time, they shared a new terminology for me, which was contributors to the kingdom. I was left with my mouth open because, as you can imagine, we're constantly talking about, here in the podcast, in the prophetic dial, in the different prophetic words, we share that we are working for the kingdom, that we are slaves of the kingdom. But for me to hear this monologue and the points that were shared, it was very deep. Apostle says, yeah, it's very deep. When we define the word contributors or collaborators, it's people that work with other people in realizing a common goal, or people that are always willing to collaborate with others. That is a collaborator. Imagine that collaborator of the kingdom has an end goal, has a purpose, and has a mission, a very well-defined mission. And that's what we are. And those that don't find their place and try to know their place, they will never be able to execute the mission as such. And when we go to the monologue and to introduction, it says that we should never give up in doing what corresponds to us just because we don't see the results. And that's where the situation comes with a lot of people, where they stop doing what corresponds to them because they don't see the results. And since they don't see the results, they get discouraged. And Lewis says, I'm one of them. And Apostle says, well, I didn't want to point you out because I didn't want you to feel offended. Lewis says, at the end, I'm always going to feel offended. So Apostle says, So Apostle continues saying that there are people that when they don't see the results they expect, they lose hope and they give up. When we are not called to do things for you to feel good or for you to feel encouraged, but because we are collaborators of the kingdom. That's it. That is one point that the introduction brings up. And the other point that the introduction throws at us is that we should stop watching what others do, because each one will reap according to what they have sown. And us that like to compare by nature, Lewis says, and Apostle says, yeah, you start looking out to see how, whether others are doing well and you're not, and comparing. And that's a spirit of division, a spirit of contention, and entities that start speaking in your ear, in the ear of those that are watching for whatever somebody else is doing. And even bringing things up that don't even matter. Therefore, it's not correct. It is good for you to find your own place and know that we're not manipulating anything here. Because in the justice of God, nobody will be able to escape. Not even the good nor the bad. Nobody will be able to escape the justice of God, but everyone will receive what corresponds to them, whether it's good or bad. It is so that monologue also says that there are harvests that will come in the day that you least expect. And that's where my mind blew up, Lewis says. Apostle says what happens is that those that are of the kingdom are not paying attention to whether they're receiving or not. They do whatever they need to do. At the end, the ministry doesn't pay you, and man doesn't pay you. God pays you. So those that are waiting for something to be given to them because they did something, that's misery, that's wretchedness, that's rejection. That's a person that is ungrateful, because the ungrateful ones know that God's children give by grace what they have received by grace. I've always said, I'm never waiting for anything from anyone. I'm doing everything for God the Father. Because if I was doing it for others, I would already be drained. Because there's something that we have to focalize very clearly, and going into the definition and description, and is that everything is done because we are chasing after a purpose. So the end of it all is to fulfill the purpose of God. That's the end goal. But how do we bring forth that purpose if there are no collaborators of the kingdom? That's where we have to figure out. Therefore, I have to fulfill the purpose of God. Nobody can fulfill the purpose of God if it's not God's children. Okay? There's something that I really liked in Isaiah 55, 10 and 11. It says something that was pretty deep. It says, because as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the eater, so it is my word that goes out of my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but it will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. See what a collaborator of the kingdom does. Is one that brings good news. A collaborator of the kingdom needs to find themselves and understand that what they're bringing is more powerful than what they could receive. A collaborator of the kingdom needs to know that that's why I respect myself. You have to learn to respect yourself. Because if you know who you are, you know that what you have is valuable. What you have has no price. Nobody has a way to pay all the wealth God has given you. And that word that, like Isaiah says very clearly, that he himself makes things produce, whether it's the rain, the snow, how he executes where everything needs to take place, how the earth is water, how it germinates. He's the one that gives the seed. He's the one that sows it. He's the one that gives the bread to eat. And that is how the word that comes out of his mouth is. And each collaborator from the kingdom, what they do is allow the word to flow from the life manual through us for others. That's deep. And the deep thing is that word is the one that prospers those that receive that word. Tell me, how am I going to be paying attention to what somebody else does? I'm paying attention to what I do, because what I give is what will produce my reward, not what I expect. Your seed speaks. Is that where we can define who is a collaborator or not? Lewis asks. No, what defines a collaborator is their seed. Do you want to know who you are? Show me your seed. When you see your seed, then that's how you will value. That's how you would define. Do you know why I like to sow well with excellence? Where people say, wow, it's because what I sow is what I'm going to harvest, what I'm going to reap. If you knew that your seed is already telling you what your harvest will be, you would sow differently. And you know something interesting? From now on, you're gonna come to me and you're gonna say, Apostle, I brought you something. Because let's be clear, you've never brought me anything, Apostle says to Lewis. And I'm saying it publicly now. I've done everything for you to give me something and you've never given me anything. But that's an old joke. But listen to this. If you knew that the seed that you're sowing is already representing your harvest, you would sow better. And you might say, but I've done everything and I haven't accomplished anything. What happens is that there's a secret. It is not the seed that you think you should give. It is the seed that he tells you to sow. And that was the bomb. He's the one that will ask you for the seed that you must give. I need to ask him, what do you want me to do? Let me tell you so that we're clear. I'm the first one that says, when he tells me to do something, I say, really, that? I ask. The seeds that I sow hurt me. They hurt me. And from the moment I wake up, I'm sowing, but they hurt. It's not simple. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable sacrificing. It's uncomfortable to have to do something for someone that you don't even know. It's uncomfortable to sacrifice yourself long hours of the night, and you have to change your plans because you realize that now you have to go more in depth with one particular person. Those are seeds. But the one that does that is someone who's clear that they are collaborators of the kingdom, not somebody that's keeping an eye on whether this person is poor or rich. No, you know that you're doing what the boss says you need to do when you need to do it. And that's it. Now I wish I was Pentecostal so I could dance on one foot. So that was the introduction. That's the introduction of this monologue. That's the introduction. Let's continue to develop it because that's why I like to go point by point. Because if I go by you bring a whole bunch of topics up, and I want to stick to the monologue. The other part says, sowing and harvest are necessary, but both don't always get done by the same person. We may reap where others have sown. Jesus said, I have sent you to harvest what you have not sown. Others have worked, and you have now entered into their labor. Sometimes we will do things without seeing any sort of reward, but we will also see rewards of things that we never worked for. You understand? Because I received benefit from my parents and I didn't do anything, and they paid for my schooling, my growth, they fed me, they gave me clothing, and they gave me all that, and somebody else built that. So that can happen too. But that can also happen to us. So nobody should be paying attention as far as what I'm going to receive, what somebody's going to give me. What you need to be focused on is what corresponds to you to do. That is where I say, how good when we do things for God the Father and not for anybody else. Okay? And there are many principles that guide you as to how to do things. There's a principle that says, honor those that honor deserve. Those are things that you don't have to discuss. But that's where ungratefulness comes. Because when you don't know how to honor those that deserve to be honored, imagine that. When you don't know how to sow in the territory that corresponds to you, when you don't know how to sow in the territory that has fed you and given you and nourished you and brought you up, then we have a problem. That's shameful. I don't know if I'm going to finish this podcast looking at you, Louis, because I don't know how you've lasted this long. Louis says, I'm always standing up and leaving. So Jesus said it very well, that he's the one that sends those to harvest in lands that we have not worked. We've received benefits. We breathe, we see, we hear, we are alive. And why are you harvesting that? Why are you reaping that? In exchange for what? You're already receiving reward for what you've never worked for. And the important thing of it all is that you have entered into their labors, meaning you are now being placed in order to be a collaborator of the kingdom. Louis says, I had never seen it like that. And Apostle says, well, there are many things you've never seen. There are many things that you don't see. Today you're going to see. So he wants us to enter into his work, which means to be a collaborator of the kingdom. We are co-heirs with Jesus. We're not only co-heirs in order to receive the reward of salvation, or in order for us to live the wealth, since he became poor to make us rich. But for us to to execute the Great Commission of salvation, where we have to go and preach the gospel to every creature, and those who believe will be baptized and saved. But those that don't believe will be condemned. Hear what a collaborator of the kingdom has on their shoulders. Oh, it's so cool. Everybody likes it when they hear, I was thinking, with the jazz music in the background. Now you get to understand what that meant. So the next point of this monologue said, the results many times come after. Sometimes years may pass before the word gives its fruit. When this happens, we do not have to be dismayed, but we must continue reaching the lost. We have to remember the words that one is the one that sows and the other one the one that harvests. That monologue kept hitting and hitting. It was focused on sowing and reaping, because that's something that we talk a lot about, sowing and harvest. But we have to be clear. Yes, it's true that what I sow, I will reap. But you have to understand that you have to handle yourself in a direction. So that direction comes within the principles. And sometimes you might say, but I make efforts and I sacrifice and I don't see anything. Don't lose hope. The Life Manual says that we should not get tired of sowing, because at the end, you understand, you will reap what you sow if you do not dismay. So we should not lose hope, not even with the ungrateful ones. Yeah, because the ungrateful ones are the ones that make you lose hope the most. And I'm not talking about you, Louis. I'm not talking about you. I'm never talking about you. But we have to understand that we do things for God the Father. And we do them for the one that gave you life, because if you, for whatever reason, feel like people have taken advantage of you, and there are many people that are ungrateful with you, stop with that, because nobody's going to surpass your ungratefulness before God. Like you say, let's have a moment of silence. Nobody will come to bring up things about others when you know that you were giving a chance. I wish I could bring stuff up about other people, but when I remember everything that I was forgiven, it passes. I forget about all that. We have to remember the words that one is the one that sows and one is the one that harvests. In other words, don't get desperate, because at the end, everyone is going to receive according to what they did. That is where I motivate many, so that in order to not make mistakes, they sow with the direction of the Spirit, not by trying to manipulate or by interest. Because those that seek a reward, or those that seek acknowledgement, that will be their reward, the word says. But those that do things for God, then God knows how to reward. So stop fighting for or seeking material things or recognition or acknowledgement. Stop that. Do things for God, because God says very clearly that those that seek in private will be rewarded in public. Hello? And many say, oh, why does so-and-so get rewards in public? Because they seek him in private. Because he connects in private, because he sows in private. You understand? They're not making a show, making a big deal. And the Father really knows how to reward, of course. That's why God makes us responsible of sowing the seed that he sends us to sow. In that is what we're responsible to do. We must be responsible, because God wants us for us to be watchtowers, and for us to bring his word so that we can correct others. Because the word says, I can't remember where, I think it was Ezekiel 3:17-19. It says, Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the people of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give them warning from me. When I say to a wicked person, you will surely die, and you do not warn them or speak out to dissuade them from their evil ways in order to save their life, that wicked person will die for their sin, and I will hold you accountable for their blood. Look what happens to the collaborators of the kingdom that do not execute the mission to which they have been delegated to execute. If people knew that many say, I didn't say anything, well, you will pay more than others because you didn't say anything. Those that are not doing their part as collaborators of the kingdom will be demanded the blood of others. Sorry, it sounds like a scary movie. I didn't want to say that, but I want you to know those that are entertained in the world and chilling, because many think that because they're reading the prophetic word but they're not sharing it, or they're reading it but they're not commenting. Let me tell you, if you don't share what will warn the unbeliever, the blood of that unbeliever will be demanded over your head. That is for you, Louis, so that you can start sharing the content in your social networks. That was a direct warning. There are many that are lost and they need to see what you're sharing. And they'll tell you, oh, wow, I liked what you shared. That word really impacted me. How good. Many don't do anything, but they're good to share about themselves and to exhibit themselves, to show off themselves. I'm not against that, but also share the kingdom. Don't you know that there are people getting lost every day? Don't you know that one word can stop the curse and the death over that person? But you are just chilling. Okay? So, as collaborators that we are, we need to understand that if the watchman quiet down, then the blood of the unbelievers will be demanded over them. One collaborator of the kingdom is a watchman, is one that warns, is one that is willing to help others. Stop thinking about benefits. Start thinking that you have a responsibility where you are continuing what Jesus one day started. That's why it's called co-heirs with Christ. Collaborators of the kingdom is co-heirs, those that give continuity to the work that he already started. And last point, this monologue share that we need to understand that we are collaborators of God the Father. We are workers and temples of the Holy Spirit, according to the grace that has been delegated to us. Let us connect to the prophetic so that others can edify on top, but be careful what you build over, because no one can lay any other foundation other than the one that he has established. We are collaborators, but that collaborator needs to be clear who he is. Number one, you are a collaborator of God the Father. Number two, you are a worker. You're the one that works. You work the ground. You prepare the soil. You are a slave of God the Father. And number three, you are a temple of the Holy Spirit. You are a temple. And within you dwells a spirit that you need to respond to. And you have been delegated a grace above grace. You are demanded to connect to the prophetic, because if you don't connect to the prophetic, then you will not know how to correctly edify. And you will start building on things that don't correspond to you. Junk, entertain with things that don't go align with your purpose. We cannot lay another foundation other than the one that he has already laid. And if you assess what you're building on top of, you realize that you're building what is not founded by him. Am I speaking clearly? I feel alone today here. You lost your joy a while back. It's because the intensity continues to grow. Lewis says, this is the word, and the word is so clear that you say, wow. Remember that the word is a double-edged sword. that it cuts deeper, it roots out through the bone marrow. It's not a joke. That is why we have to be clear. If I am edifying or over edifying, what does that mean, Lewis says? Well, imagine I have a foundation. Oh, that's too little. Let me add a little bit. Let me add something on top of that. So why are you making things up when everything has already been defined? If you're connecting to a prophetic source like this house and you neglect that because you're seeking another philosophy and ideology and entertaining yourself with people that have no connection or foundation in the kingdom, you're poking me. I want to stop, but you keep pushing me. That's deep. You feed yourself with philosophies. You're sharing thoughts and philosophies. And what is that? Somebody seeking more foundation other than the one that's been given to them. So you understand what it means to build on other foundations other than the ones established by him? When you're doing it, you enjoy it because your flesh is fed by it. You don't want to be found entertained, edifying, overbuilding in a foundation that's already been built, that's already been established. It sounds ridiculous. And the last part, in this same point, we have to remember to be steadfast and constant, growing in the work of the kingdom always, knowing that your work in God is not in vain. We see that in 1 Corinthians 15:58, it says that. Because the power is in the seed. Hear this well. The power is in the seed, not in the one that plants or the one that harvests. You see that? People are killing themselves to, okay, who's planting, who's harvesting? No, stop. Kill yourself for your seed to be the best. And there's no better seed than the one that is guided by the Spirit. Because that is the best, perfect seed. And every collaborator of the kingdom knows that the best thing of it all is to get to plant the seed that goes. You have the parable of the sower. He sowed in the way, the side of the road, in the rocks, in good soil. Each territory had its circumstances. You know, the one on the side got burned by the sun. The one that got eaten by the birds. But the one that was in good soil, it grew. What does that mean? That it is good to handle yourself in a way that you're planting the seed in the territory that corresponds. Wow. And every collaborator of the kingdom will always try that if something didn't give them result in one way, they will switch the seed in order to get result one way or another. And that can cost you a day or two, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. There are people that I've been waiting for 20 years and others 15. I'm here like surrounded by 15 years, 20 years, and at the end I harvest. I got my harvest, but I never got tired of planting the seed I had to sow. And I never denied the seed when it was asked. Because if I started saying, oh no, I'm not going to give anything because he doesn't give anything to me. No. We have always been grateful to God. God has never closed the door on us. We always need to understand that some will plant, others will water, but the growth is given by God. So neither the one that plants is something, nor the one that waters is something, but the one that gives the growth. And the one that plants and the one that waters are the same thing, even if each one will receive their reward based on their labor.
Gracias por sintonizar nuestro podcast Misión GJ. Nos vemos en un próximo episodio.